The morning sun beat down on the Nevada desert as Captain James Miller wiped the sweat from his forehead. He checked his watch. 900 hours. The weapons demonstration would begin in exactly 1 hour. Everything had to be perfect. This wasn't just any ordinary showcase. Today's audience would be rather unusual. 3 days ago, a massive silver ship had appeared in Earth's orbit. The world had held its breath, expecting either destruction or salvation. Instead, they got bureaucracy. The aliens, calling themselves the Galactic Council, had arrived to evaluate Earth for membership. Their timing couldn't have been more interesting, right in the middle of the largest international military exercise in human history. "Sir, the range is ready," Sergeant Adams reported, gesturing to the neat row of weapons laid out on the folding tables. Everything from standard-issue rifles to the newest smart weapons was on display. The morning light gleamed off their well-polished surfaces. Miller nodded. "And our guests?" "Their shuttle just landed, sir. The escort team is bringing them now." Right on cue, a group of vehicles approached from the base. Miller straightened his uniform and watched as they drew closer. This would be his first time seeing the aliens up close, and he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. The vehicles stopped, and out stepped creatures that looked nothing like the movies had prepared them for. Ambassador Thex, the lead representative, stood nearly 8 feet tall with silvery skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Behind him, 4 other council members emerged, each wearing what looked like floating tablets around their necks. "Welcome to Range Complex 7, Miller said, stepping forward with a practiced smile. "We're honored to demonstrate Earth's defensive capabilities." Ambassador Thex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Defensive capabilities. Our scans showed only chemical propellants and primitive projectile weapons. Surely this is not your primary arsenal." Miller's smile didn't waver. "We find these tools quite effective, Ambassador. Perhaps a demonstration would help explain why." The aliens followed him to the first station. Miller picked up an M4 carbine, explaining its mechanism clearly and simply. "This is one of our standard infantry weapons. It uses a controlled chemical reaction to propel a small metal projectile at high velocity." "Fascinating," one of the council members said, tapping at their floating tablet. "They still use solid ammunition. How quaint." Miller continued professionally, despite the condescension in their voices. He demonstrated various weapons: pistols, shotguns, sniper rifles, and even some of the newer prototype systems. With each demonstration, the aliens' expressions grew more amused. "You mean to tell us," Ambassador Thex said, "that your soldiers still carry individual rounds of ammunition, that they must physically reload these devices, that they haven't even developed basic energy projection?" "Our methods are proven effective," Miller replied calmly. He nodded to Sergeant Adams, who set up the next demonstration. They had saved the best for last. The heavy weapons demonstration began. The ground shook as the artillery opened up. Tanks moved into position, their main guns thundering across the desert. The air filled with the sound of freedom, as the old-timers liked to call it. When the smoke cleared, the targets, thick slabs of advanced alien metals provided by the Council themselves, showed the results. Clean holes punched through materials supposedly impervious to primitive weapons. Ambassador Thex's amusement had faded slightly. "Interesting," he said, his tone more measured now. "Though, of course, these would be useless against modern energy shielding." "Perhaps," Miller agreed diplomatically, "though we found that sometimes the old ways have advantages of their own." The council members huddled together, speaking in their own language. Finally, Ambassador Thex turned back to Miller. "The Galactic Council has made its initial assessment," he announced formally. "Earth will be classified as a protected species, given your technological limitations. We will begin the process of upgrading your defensive capabilities to meet modern standards. Your projectile weapons will be phased out, of course." Miller kept his expression neutral, but inside he felt a deep unease. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting these weapons. The thought of abandoning them for untested alien technology seemed foolish. As the aliens departed, Sergeant Adams stepped up beside him. "Sir, what do you think this means for us?" Miller watched the shuttle lift off, its anti-gravity drive silent compared to the honest roar of their jets. "It means, Sergeant, that the galaxy has a lot to learn about humanity, and maybe we have something to teach them, whether they know it or not." The sun climbed higher over the desert range, glinting off the spent brass casings that littered the ground. Somewhere up there, the Council was already making plans to help Earth join the modern galaxy. But Miller had a feeling they'd soon learn why humans had stuck with their primitive weapons for so long. Sometimes, the old ways were the best ways. And sometimes, those who laughed first, laughed last. The Galactic Council headquarters made the United Nations building look like a garden shed. Major Robert Thompson stood at the enormous window, looking out at the three suns that lit this alien world. Below him, vessels of all shapes and sizes moved through organized lanes of space traffic. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Professor Nax said, stepping up beside him. The alien scientist was one of the few council members who seemed genuinely interested in human technology. "Though I imagine it's rather overwhelming." "The traffic?" Thompson asked, adjusting his dress uniform. After 2 weeks here, he still couldn't get used to the perfect temperature and artificial gravity. "The responsibility," Nax replied. "Your species has just joined a community of over 300 spacefaring civilizations. That's quite a step up from being alone on your world." Before Thompson could respond, the chamber doors slid open with a soft hum. It was time for the military integration hearing. He took his place at the presentation podium, noting how the stadium-sized room made him feel like an ant under a magnifying glass. The council members filed in, their floating seats arranging themselves in perfect circles around him. Ambassador Thex, now serving as Earth's integration supervisor, took the primary position. "Major Thompson," Thex began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, "your world has been given 3 months to review our standard military protocols. Are you prepared to begin the integration process?" Thompson cleared his throat. "Actually, Ambassador, I'm here to request an exception to the standard protocols." A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Thex's silver skin flickered with what Thompson had learned was surprise. "Exception?" Thex asked. "The protocols have served the Council for over 10,000 years. What possible exception could Earth require?" Thompson activated his presentation display. Images of human weapons appeared in the air around him. "We wish to maintain our current arsenal alongside your energy weapon systems." The murmur turned into outright laughter. Thompson waited patiently for it to die down. "Major," one of the council members said, her translator making her sound almost motherly, "you can't be serious. Your chemical propellant weapons are hopelessly outdated. Our basic civilian shields can stop such primitive attacks." "With respect," Thompson replied, "we've analyzed your combat records. Every major conflict in Council space for the past 1,000 years has been fought with energy weapons. That's not diversity of tactics. That's stagnation." The laughter stopped. Thex leaned forward in his floating chair. "Choose your next words carefully, Major. You're addressing beings who mastered space travel while your people were still fighting with swords." Thompson nodded. "Exactly my point, Ambassador. We evolved our weapons through necessity and experience. Each new technology added to our capabilities instead of replacing them entirely. Even now, our special forces train with bows and knives alongside our most advanced weapons." He switched the display to show military training exercises. "Humanity has fought itself for thousands of years. It's not something we're proud of, but it taught us valuable lessons. One of the most important is to never put all your trust in a single technology." "And what happens," another council member asked, "when you face an enemy with shields that can stop any physical projectile?" "What happens," Thompson countered, "when you face an enemy who can defeat energy shields? Do you have a backup plan?" Silence fell over the chamber. Even Thex seemed to be considering his words. The Council's mandate is clear, Thex finally said. All member species must standardize their military technology. It allows for unified defense strategies and simplified logistics. We cannot make exceptions. Thompson straightened his back. Then Earth respectfully requests more time to consider full membership. Denied, Thex said flatly. Earth has already been announced as a protectorate. You have 5 years to phase out your projectile weapons and fully convert to Council-approved energy weapons. This is not a request, Major. It is a mandate. As Thompson left the chamber, Professor Nax fell into step beside him. That was quite bold, the alien scientist said quietly. And between us, not entirely wrong. Some of us have been arguing for technological diversity for years. Thompson managed a small smile. Keep studying our primitive weapons, Professor. Something tells me the galaxy might need them sooner than the Council thinks. Back in his temporary quarters, Thompson stared out at the alien city. Somewhere out there, humanity's oldest tools were being dismissed as relics. But he knew better. As his old drill sergeant used to say, no matter how fancy your weapons get, sometimes you just need to throw a rock really, really well. He began drafting his report to Earth Command. They needed to prepare for all possibilities, including the chance that the Council's mandate might someday prove to be a deadly mistake. Intelligence Officer Tom Wilson hadn't slept in 36 hours. The gentle hum of the Council archive room had become his constant companion as he dug through report after report. Something wasn't adding up, and he was determined to find out what. You're still here. Professor Nax's voice made him jump. The alien scientist moved surprisingly quietly for his size. The archives will still be here tomorrow, you know. Wilson rubbed his tired eyes. Look at this, he said, pointing to his display. 17 outer colonies gone dark in the past month. The Council claims they're having communication problems. But you don't believe it, Nax finished, pulling up a floating chair. Neither do I. That's why I gave you access to these records. Wilson pulled up another report. Every colony that went dark had something in common. They all reported strange energy readings just before losing contact. And look at this. He brought up an image that showed a massive dark shape moving against a star field. Nax's skin paled to an almost white color. Where did you get this? Last transmission from Colony 7, Wilson said. They weren't having communication problems. They were being attacked. The alien scientist studied the image carefully. The Council has classified all information about these incidents. They don't want to cause a panic, or they don't want to admit they're helpless, Wilson countered. He pulled up more files. Every affected colony had the latest Council defense systems. Energy shields, plasma cannons, the works. But in each case, their weapons did nothing. Nax nodded slowly. The Ravagers, he whispered. We thought they were just stories to scare young ones. Ancient tales of creatures that could walk through energy weapons like they were walking through air. Wilson leaned forward. They're real, aren't they? And they're back. If they are. Nax's voice trailed off. The Council hasn't faced a real threat in over 1,000 years. We've grown comfortable with our technology, convinced of our superiority. The human stood up and began pacing. That's why you've been so interested in our weapons. You suspected this might happen. Suspected. Feared. Nax pulled up more classified files. The old records speak of the Ravagers' natural energy absorption abilities. No energy weapon could harm them. The ancient races had to use physical weapons to drive them back. Physical weapons, Wilson repeated, like the ones Earth still uses. The ones the Council is trying to make us get rid of. A quiet alarm sounded in the archive room. More reports were coming in. 3 more colonies had gone dark. The Ravagers were getting closer to major Council worlds. We need to warn them, Wilson said, already copying the evidence to his secure terminal. Nax touched his arm. The Council won't listen. Not officially. They're too proud, too set in their ways. But The alien scientist paused. Perhaps we can prepare in other ways. Wilson understood. Earth hasn't converted its military yet. We still have our primitive weapons. And I bet we're not the only ones who've been dragging our feet on the Council's mandate. I can put you in touch with others who share our concerns, Nax said. Scientists, military leaders from other worlds who haven't fully abandoned their old ways. We'll need all the help we can get. Wilson began sending encrypted messages back to Earth Command. They needed to know what was coming. How long do you think we have? Not long enough, Nax replied grimly. The Ravagers move quickly once they start their expansion. Weeks, maybe months at most. The human smiled grimly. Then we better hope humanity's old-fashioned ways prove useful again. As if to emphasize his words, another alarm sounded. Another colony gone dark. Time was running out. Wilson gathered his evidence and prepared to leave the archives. Earth would need every minute to prepare. The Council might laugh at human weapons, but soon they'd learn why humanity had kept them around. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones, especially against ancient threats. The Council won't like this, Nax warned as they left. No, Wilson agreed, but they'll like being extinct even less. The archives sealed behind them, now holding one more secret in their vast memory banks. The secret of humanity's chance to prove that sometimes progress means remembering what worked in the past. The Ravagers were coming, and Earth's primitive weapons might be the galaxy's last hope. The capital city of Centauri Prime was burning. Captain James Miller watched from his observation post as another energy shield generator exploded in a shower of sparks. The Council's mighty defenses were falling one by one. This is what happens when everyone uses the same technology, Surgeon Adams muttered beside him. Their small team of human observers had been sent to watch the Council's defense of this vital world. So far, there hadn't been much to observe except failure. The Ravagers moved through the city like living shadows. Their dark, crystalline bodies absorbed every energy blast fired at them. Council troops were in full retreat, their advanced weapons nothing more than expensive light shows against the invaders. Miller's radio crackled. "Sir," Intelligence Officer Wilson's voice came through. "The Council's ordering a full evacuation of the government district. They're giving up the city." "Not yet. They're not," Miller replied. He turned to his team. "Looks like we're done observing. Time to get to work." 20 human soldiers against an army of energy-immune aliens. The Council representatives thought they were insane. Maybe they were, but they had something the Council didn't. Weapons that could actually hurt these things. "Set up at the evacuation point," Miller ordered. "Standard ammunition first. Let's see what works best against these bastards." His team moved with practiced efficiency, setting up overlapping fields of fire around the spaceport, where thousands of civilians were trying to escape. They had brought a variety of weapons, everything from simple rifles to heavy machine guns. The first Ravager appeared 3 minutes later. It moved like liquid darkness, its crystalline surface rippling as it absorbed the dying shots from retreating Council forces. "Wait for it," Miller called. "Let it get closer." The creature was 30 meters away when Miller gave the order. Fire. The sound of gunfire echoed through the alien city for the first time in its history. The Ravager staggered as bullets slammed into it. Unlike energy weapons, there was nothing for its body to absorb. Physics was physics, no matter what galaxy you were in. "It's working," Adams shouted. The creature was falling back, its crystalline surface cracking under the impact of sustained fire. More Ravagers appeared, drawn by the sound of combat. Miller's team shifted targets, their conventional weapons proving that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. "Watch your ammo," Miller reminded them. "Make every shot count." A Council security team stood watching in shock as human bullets did what their energy weapons couldn't. Ambassador Thex himself appeared, his silver skin pale with disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "Those are just primitive projectiles." "Sometimes primitive works," Miller replied, not taking his eyes off the battle. Now either help us evacuate your people or stay out of our way. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it was over, dozens of Ravager corpses littered the ground around the spaceport. Every human soldier was still alive, though their ammunition was running dangerously low. "Status report," Miller called out. "Standard rounds work okay," Adams reported. "But the hollow points seem to do the most damage. Something about their crystalline structure. It shatters instead of just cracking." Ambassador Thex approached Miller as the last evacuation ships lifted off. "It seems we may have been hasty in our judgment of your weapons." "With all due respect, Ambassador," Miller replied, reloading his rifle, "you haven't seen anything yet. This was just 20 soldiers with basic weapons. Imagine what an army could do." "The Council will want to study this," Thex said, "to understand how such simple weapons could succeed where our advanced technology failed." Miller watched the final transport lift off, carrying the last civilians to safety. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Ambassador, your energy weapons are great for most things, but they're not the only answer." As night fell over the embattled city, Miller's team prepared for another fight. The Ravagers would be back, probably in greater numbers. But now the galaxy knew they weren't invincible. Sometimes it just took a little old-fashioned thinking and a lot of well-aimed lead to solve a new problem. "Sir," Adams called out, "more contacts approaching." Miller smiled grimly. "Well then, let's show them what else these primitive weapons can do." The Galactic Council's emergency session was interrupted by the sound of explosions. Through the Grand Chamber's windows, they could see 3 Ravager ships descending on the Capitol. The council members rushed to evacuate, but Professor Nax stayed at his podium. "We don't have time for pride anymore," he announced, his voice cutting through the panic. 7 major worlds have fallen in the past week. Our energy weapons are useless, but we've seen what works. The main screen activated, showing footage from Centauri Prime. Human soldiers holding the line. Conventional weapons stopping the unstoppable. Major Thompson stood beside Nax, no longer feeling small in the massive chamber. "Earth is ready to help," Thompson said, "but we do this our way. No more mandates about acceptable weapons. No more looking down on primitive technology." Another explosion rocked the building. Ambassador Thex, who had witnessed the defense of Centauri Prime firsthand, stepped forward. "The Council recognizes Earth's military authority in this crisis," he declared. "What do you need from us?" Thompson smiled. "We need your factories. All of them. And we need them now." Within hours, the first emergency transmission went out to all Council worlds. Earth's military leaders had prepared for this, had stockpiled designs and strategies. Now, production lines that once made energy rifles began manufacturing ammunition. Shipyards that built energy cannon arrays started producing good old-fashioned railguns. "Watch your sectors," Captain Miller called out. His team, now reinforced with fresh troops and plenty of ammunition, defended the Council's Capitol building. They had learned much since their first encounter with the Ravagers. Armor-piercing rounds for the big ones. Sergeant Adams reminded the troops. Hollow points for the smaller ones. They had discovered that different Ravager types had different weaknesses, something the Council's one-size-fits-all energy weapons had never needed to consider. The first wave hit their lines like a dark tide. But this time, humanity was ready. Heavy machine guns opened up, their thunderous reports echoing off the crystal spires of the alien city. Railguns mounted on hovering platforms provided heavy support, their hypersonic projectiles punching through multiple Ravagers with each shot. Professor Nax worked frantically at his command center, coordinating with other scientists. "The humans were right," he announced over the general frequency. "The Ravagers' energy absorption ability makes them vulnerable to physical damage. Their crystalline structure can't adapt to kinetic impacts." "Tell us something we don't know," Miller muttered, dropping another Ravager with a well-placed burst. But the professor wasn't finished. "Their ships used the same defense," Nax continued excitedly. That's why our space weapons couldn't hurt them, but a solid projectile. As if on cue, the sky lit up. Earth's first contribution to the Council's Space Force had arrived. Old-style battleships, refitted with alien technology, but armed with massive coil guns instead of energy weapons. They engaged the Ravager ships directly, proving that physics worked the same way in space as it did on the ground. "Beautiful," Thompson said, watching from the command center. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Without their immunity to energy weapons, the Ravagers found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't easily counter. They retreated, leaving their dead scattered across the capital. In the aftermath, the council chambers were oddly quiet. The same beings who had laughed at human weapons now studied footage of the battle with intense interest. "We were wrong," Ambassador Thex admitted to the assembled human officers. "Our pride in our advanced technology blinded us to other possibilities. We forgot that new doesn't always mean better." "The important thing," Thompson replied diplomatically, "is that we work together now. Your technology combined with our tried and true methods. The best of both worlds." As cleanup crews began clearing the debris, Professor Nax approached Miller's team. "Humanity has taught us a valuable lesson," he said, "one that may have saved our civilization. Never forget what works, even as you discover new ways forward." Miller nodded, watching his troops clean their primitive weapons with practiced care. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's old-fashioned ways were leading the charge. Sometimes, the best future was built on foundations from the past. The war room inside Earth's new Galactic Defense Academy buzzed with activity. Holograms showed fleet movements across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, while aliens and humans worked side by side at control stations. Major Thompson stood at the central platform, directing the largest military operation in Council history. "Status report on Production Center 7, he called out. "Running at full capacity," Professor Nax replied, his silver fingers dancing over holographic controls. "The fusion of Council technology with human weapon designs is exceeding all expectations." On the main screen, footage showed the newest hybrid weapons rolling off production lines. Railguns powered by alien energy cores, smart bullets guided by Council targeting systems, traditional shotguns loaded with programmable matter shells. "The Ravagers won't expect this," Captain Miller said, studying the tactical displays. His combat experience had earned him a place on the command staff. "They think they know what we can do. They're wrong." The first wave of counterattacks had already begun. On the tactical display, green dots representing Allied forces pushed back the red tide of Ravager expansion. Every victory provided more data, more understanding of the enemy's weaknesses. "Launch Operation Thunderbolt," Thompson ordered. Across the galaxy, human officers led Council forces in coordinated strikes. The old military wisdom of Earth, combined with advanced alien technology, proved devastating. "Sir," Sergeant Adams, now a liaison officer, called from his station, "the Ravagers are adapting. They're developing some kind of physical armor to counter our projectiles." Thompson smiled. "Just as we predicted, Professor." Nax activated another display. "Phase 2 weapons are ready. The Ravagers think they can adapt to simple physical impacts, but they've never seen anything like this." The screen showed the next generation of hybrid weapons, guns that fired both physical rounds and energy pulses in alternating bursts, missiles that created gravitational singularities on impact, old-fashioned grenades filled with exotic matter. "Beautiful," Miller said. "They adapt to one threat. We hit them with another. Just like fighting insurgents back home. The moment they figure out your pattern, you change it." The tactical displays updated as the new weapons reached the front lines. The Ravager advance hadn't just been stopped. It was being pushed back. Centuries of human military experience, of endless adaptation and counter-adaptation, were proving their worth. "Council ships in Sector 7 report success," Adams announced. "The new combined arms doctrine is working. Energy weapons suppressed their defenses, Physical projectiles finished them off. Thompson watched the battle unfold across 3 dimensions. Humanity had spent its history fighting itself, learning and adapting with each conflict. Now all that hard-won knowledge was serving a greater purpose. "We've located their command center," Nax reported suddenly. All eyes turned to his display. Deep in unexplored space, a massive Ravager-high ship coordinated their forces. "Time to end this," Thompson said. "Launch Operation Final Thunder." The combined fleet moved into position. Ships of every council race, now armed with hybrid weapons and led by human tactical officers, prepared for the decisive battle. The Ravagers had never faced an enemy that could adapt as quickly as they could. They had never fought opponents who changed tactics with each engagement. "All ships report ready," Miller announced. "The Ravagers are marshaling their forces. They know we're coming." "Good," Thompson replied. "Let them come. Let them see what happens when you combine the wisdom of the past with the technology of the future." As the fleet moved into attack position, Thompson couldn't help but smile. The Council had laughed at human weapons, had called them primitive and obsolete. Now those same primitive weapons, enhanced by alien science, were about to win the largest war in galactic history. "All ships, weapons free," he ordered. "Show them what humanity can do." The battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. And this time, humanity was leading the charge. 1 year after the final battle with the Ravagers, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. Gone were the floating seats arranged in perfect circles. Instead, representatives from every species sat together at a round table, with Earth's delegation holding a position of honor. Major Thompson, now General Thompson, stood at the podium. The same podium where, not so long ago, he had argued against abandoning Earth's primitive weapons. Today, he would deliver a very different speech. "The war is over," he began, his voice carrying across the chamber. "The last Ravager stronghold fell 3 days ago. But the real victory isn't in what we destroyed. It's in what we built." The main display showed images from across the galaxy. Council ships armed with hybrid weapons. Training academies where alien soldiers learned human combat techniques. Weapons factories where ancient wisdom merged with advanced technology. 1 year ago, we faced extinction, Thompson continued. Not because we lacked technology, but because we had become too dependent on a single type of technology. We had forgotten one of humanity's most important lessons. Diversity is strength. In the audience, Captain Miller sat with his team. They had all received commendations for their role in the first successful defense against the Ravagers. Sergeant Adams, now Captain Adams, led the new combat training program for Council forces. "The Ravagers taught us all a valuable lesson," Thompson said. "They showed us that no single solution, no matter how advanced, is perfect. True progress doesn't mean abandoning what works. It means building upon it." Professor Nax, now head of the Council's Hybrid Technology Division, nodded in agreement. His research had helped create the weapons that ultimately won the war. Weapons that combined the best of human ingenuity with alien advancement. "Earth didn't save the galaxy by being more advanced," Thompson continued. "We helped save it by remembering our past, by understanding that sometimes the old ways, combined with new ideas, create something better than either could be alone." Ambassador Thex, who had once laughed at human weapons, stood up. "The Council recognizes the wisdom in these words," he announced. "We hereby establish the principle of technological integration. No longer will we force member species to abandon their traditional methods. Instead, we will learn from each other, combine our strengths, and grow stronger together." The chamber erupted in applause. It was a fundamental shift in how the Council operated. No more looking down on primitive technology. No more forcing everyone to use the same solutions. "But our work isn't finished," Thompson said as the applause died down. "The galaxy is vast, and there may be other threats out there. Threats that we can only face if we remain adaptable, if we remember that progress means adding to our capabilities, not replacing them." The display showed the new Galactic Defense Academy on Earth. Alien students learning human military history alongside advanced physics. Human instructors teaching hand-to-hand combat, while alien professors explained energy field theory. We stand at the beginning of a new era, Thompson concluded. An era where wisdom from the past guides us into the future, where we judge ideas not by how new they are, but by how well they work. The Council once laughed at human guns, until they fired. Now we know better. Every piece of technology, every method, every idea has its place. Our job is to find the right combination. As the ceremony concluded, Miller approached his old friend. "Nice speech, sir, though I think you left out the best part." "What's that?" Thompson asked. "The look on their faces when our primitive weapons first took down a Ravager," Miller grinned. "Sometimes the best teacher is a good old-fashioned, 'I told you so.'" Thompson laughed. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had helped change it. Not by being the most advanced, but by remembering that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. And now, as Earth took its place as a leader in the Galactic Council, they would make sure that lesson was never forgotten again.